The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me for part 3 of our Tenzing Manager webinar series. This section is entitled PeakOS and NOS Endpoint Deployment, Management and Configuration Best Practices. My name is Ed Richardson, and I'm the Head of Technical Services for Tenzing US. For part 3 in this series, we're going to discuss the concept of endpoint grouping in the Tenzing Manager, and what you can achieve by using groups to make deployment and ongoing management of Tenzing clients a simple exercise. Among the concepts discussed will be how to create a group in the manager, options for configuring the new group, and how to secure the group once you've created it. Post-deployment group-based management processes will be covered as well. This will include a demonstration of best practice methods using these concepts to ensure that your Tenzing clients are securely configured and made available to the end user using the auto configuration concept. This will allow you to be successful in your deployment regardless of whether you're configuring clients for in-office or work from home use. All of the attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. Please feel free to post questions, and we will have some time left over for Q&A at the end of the webinar. We'll also have a couple of poll questions throughout the webinar to better gauge what you're doing with the Tenzing Manager. If you could, please, I'd appreciate it if you could answer those questions. So let's jump right into it. The content that we're going to cover today: what is a management group and why should we use it? What do we want to do with the management groups? The types of groups that we have. How to create automatic deployments. This is important because this is how you get people up and running quickly. How to secure those deployments using group security, endpoint security, and SSL certificate security. And then post-deployment management. What can we do with them after we've deployed the units? We're going to begin with the concept of grouping clients in the Tenzing Manager, what you gain by using groups, and how you can achieve maximum functionality through grouping clients in the Tenzing Manager. Let's talk a little bit about the methodologies of filtering first of all. The types of groups that you can do here are going to be IP-based. IP address-based groups are either inclusive or exclusive in order to either bring units in based on their IP subnet or to exclude them based on their IP subnets, and we'll look into that a little bit more later. We can use this for work from home so that we can exclude our internal units in order to achieve a group of only our external users. We also have the opportunity to create internal subnet-based groups for our in-office workers so that we can logically separate those by floor, by office, etc. We'll talk a little bit about how to strategically filter your units in order to achieve auto configuration. The auto configuration process allows you to take an out-of-the-box unit, set it up, plug it in, and turn it on, and you can leverage the auto configuration in order to configure, name, and firmware update your devices. We'll also take a look at securing the Tenzing deployment, SSL registration, or SSL validation rather, registration codes, and then how to lock down your Tenzing endpoints. Now, first of all, why do you use a management group? The management groups are going to achieve logical separation between different sets of your clients. For you, that may be the different offices or floors inside of an office building. It may be the delineation between your internal and your external clients, or it may simply be a matter of separating them based on use case. Management groups in the Tenzing Manager are intended to simplify management tasks. We want you to be able to segregate and compartmentalize the client base. Management groups can be based off of all of the items that I just mentioned. They can also even be based off of the model or the type of clients if you choose to. Regardless of the purpose, management groups are always going to make your life simpler. They allow you to take a large number of clients, break them down into smaller units, and be able to quickly find the units that you want to address and then to make changes only to those specific units. In the event of a help desk, this makes things much simpler to support your end users. By way of example, if you've got a multi-story office building, say 300 people, you could have a group of 300 clients all together, and you could probably be able to get through supporting those clients. You likely would be able to eventually find the client that you're looking for when someone calls the help desk. You'd be able to work with them. You'd be able to get them back up and running. But when Jane calls the help desk and she's having a problem, you have to dig through 300 clients in order to find hers. Zero client management solutions are designed to make life simpler, not to make it more difficult. So in terms of that, we want you to be able to create groups to give you logical separation. How much better would it be if you had each floor of the building separated into a group with the clients for that floor in the appropriate group? You could even take it a step further and make subgroups for each individual office and place the clients into those. This way, when Jane calls the help desk, she can simply say that she's in Office 308, and you could go straight to the Office 308 group and find Jane's zero client. How much better would that be? Besides ease of use, security is also a great reason to use management groups. We have the ability to enforce security to our endpoints by way of configuration templates within each of our groups. We can use the same template across multiple groups, or we can create individual templates for each group. This allows us to assign the correct security profile to the correct client group throughout the environment, ensuring that everyone has the same permission set and that the permission set is right for the use case. When we deploy changes to the security configuration, those changes are applied in a uniform manner to all members of the group, removing the potential for configuration errors. This is a huge deal when your help desk goes to reconfigure a machine, especially in a secure environment. We can't risk not getting that security level right. Let's take a look at some of our options for creating a management group. In this example here, we see our group name and description. This is a freshly created group. And in this particular case, this group is set to filter by MAC address, as well as to filter by the registration code assigned to the group. We do, however, have other options. We can filter by the computer name. We also have the ability to filter by the IP address. We even have the opportunity to filter by the model or the firmware version that's deployed to those machines. So it's very versatile in terms of how we get the clients into here. Now, the methodology for this may be increased manageability, it may be increased security, or it may be physical location. You might want to separate these again into the floors of a building, for instance, or even for your internal versus external users. The IP address filter, for instance, is a great way to separate machines that are inside or outside of your network. Because you can either include or exclude an IP address range, you have the opportunity here to exclude all your internal machines to create an external group, or you can include all of your internal machines in order to create an internal group. We can also leverage registration codes for increased security. A registration code is an alphanumeric code that you can assign to a specific group, and all of the endpoints have to have that registration group assigned to them in order to be able to become members. And the MAC address gives us the maximum versatility. We can create an ad hoc grouping based off of the MAC addresses of all of the units that we desire to include in the group. This gives us the ability to take even disparate machines. Maybe they even have different firmware versions. They could be different models, whatever we want to do, and we can create an automated grouping out of those machines. This is a great option for executives who need to have a different configuration than the regular task worker. Now this is a medium security configuration here. It's got the MAC address filter, so it's going to determine the machines that are in the group. It also has the registration code assigned to it in order to ensure that it has the security for the group. But if we want to take it one step further, we also have the ability to require its name to be assigned to the group. We can create a computer name list, and only the machines with the appropriate naming convention can be allowed into the group. This gives us a higher security level. One of the things we have to remember with all of these filters is that each one of these is an AND filter. These are not OR filters. So each filtering regimen that we assign to the units in here has to be adhered to in order for that unit to become a member of the group. So by using these three filters together, we now have specified that it has to be included in the MAC address list, it has to be included in the name list, and it has to have the registration code. You can go beyond this to also require specific IP address ranges, specific platforms, or again, models or firmware versions. Now, what do we do inside of one of these groups? Once the machines have become a member of the group, what's the next step? The next step is configuring the grouped clients. This is the client configuration portion. Now, automated client configuration is oriented toward our NOS 0 clients and our PeakOS thin clients. The templates can be applied to machines. Those templates are created off of a subject endpoint, and those can be automatically applied to the group so that each member of the group is configured identically with the specified template. We can edit the configured clients list in order to allow clients to be reconfigured if we should happen to change the template. Automatic naming. We can create an automated naming convention for the clients. So we can assign a name to them in the example that you see in the slide ahead of you. These units would be named LabTC with a hyphen and a 3-digit number at the end of it. That number is automatically incremented as each new client becomes a member of the group so that all of the clients have the same naming convention. This goes back to the group filtering requirement of allowing a name specified list. Third, we can choose the firmware update version that we want to apply to all of the members of the group. We can click the Select Firmware button in order to pick any firmware version that we want to apply here. And each member of the group, as they become a member, will be compared against that firmware version and brought to that version if they're not already on it. Beneath the firmware update box, we have the optional update actions. We can perform that upgrade to the firmware version on the next reboot. We can reset the unit back to the factory defaults, or we can even tell it to download the firmware from another machine local to it that already has it. This is very useful if you're doing large deployments across maybe a school campus where there are different buildings with the machines in them already. You can add into there very easily. Additional to that, we also have deferral options. We can allow the end user some control over this process by allowing them to postpone that task for a period of time that we can define, or we can allow it to proceed after that user's been off of the endpoint for a period of time. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the options that we have for filtering inside of our groups. Now this is my demo manager here. We've got a couple of clients in it. These are on one of our NOS 0 client builds. And these are just a vanilla client here. You can see these are in a group called Mac Filtered with no registration code. And if we take a look at this, we can see that they are filtered by the MAC address here. Here's our MAC address list. This ensures that these units and only these units will become members of this group. Within the filtering algorithms, we have the platform filter. The platform filter for our 0 and thin clients will allow us to address the client configuration section. Without this filter set, we are not able to apply those configuration templates that will enforce the security of our endpoints. In this particular section here, in the Client Configuration tab, this is where we will apply our automatic configuration process. We have three major options in here as detailed in the last slide. We have our client configuration where we can add a configuration template. For this example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in our locked down security template. These units currently have no template on them, and so they have open security. They're not secured. You could go into the endpoints control panel, you could look around, you could make changes if you wanted to, you could do whatever you wanted. So we've now assigned the lockdown security template to this group. I'm going to click OK. We also have the automatic naming configured here where we create webinar with a 1-digit number at the end of it. And then we have the automatic updates set to be the 16.1.20.2 firmware. So we can check those as well. What this is going to do is this is your auto configuration process, your zero-touch configuration. When we enable all three of these options, a newly deployed machine, when it becomes a member of this MAC filtered group, would automatically apply its template. It would configure its name to match this naming convention, and then it'll update the firmware, all three in one shot. When we do this, we come out of this process with a fully configured unit that's ready for the end user to pick it up and to begin using it. I'm going to go ahead and click OK on this. If we wait just a moment, these machines are going to begin reconfiguring themselves, but we can force that auto configuration in order to speed up the process just a little bit. So now what we've done is I've kicked off automatically what would normally take place on its own in a couple of minutes, just for the sake of time. But this is going to apply the auto configuration templates to these machines based on the automatic configuration process that we detailed in here. We've now successfully configured both of those units. They both are offline and are rebooting. And when they come back online, they're going to show up in our reg code filtered group up here. Now, while we wait for those units to reboot, I want to talk a little bit about IP address filtering. This particular group here is our IP address filtered group, and this is the typical grouping methodology that you would use for an internal group inside of your company. If we wanted to take a look at this group's properties, what we'd see here is that we have our platform filter so that we can use the auto configuration. And then we would be using an IP address filter. This is an inclusive filter. It means that all of the units on the 172.16.6 subnet are going to be included in this group by nature of this include checkbox being checked. This is the typical configuration for internally connected units because we always know our internal subnets. We know that we're going to have machines on the 172.16.6 network. So we can create a group based on that network in order to bring all of those machines into the group, regardless of how they're connected, where they're at. Anything that's on this IP address range is going to show up. Now for our external users, it may be a little different because all of these people are in their homes. They're using their home Wi-Fi or their home internet connection. They may not necessarily know what their IP address is, and we may not know either. If they happen to be a traveling user, somebody who is a mobile employee, they may not even be at the same IP address all the time. So how do we manage grouping those clients? Well, the answer to that question is also the IP address filter, except that we use exclusive filters rather than inclusive. In this case here, what we've done is we've taken our internal subnets and we've excluded them by unchecking the boxes over here. So we've told the group that everything except for our internal IP addresses should be members of this group, which by nature will give us external users. Now we could take this particular group doesn't have any other security applied to it besides the IP address filtering here, and that's completely appropriate if that's what we want to do. If we want to take it a step further so that we can increase the security, we can always use the registration codes with these filters as well. The reg codes are able to be used with any filtering methodology. You can use them either individual per group, or you can use them in a multi-group format. Now let's see if these guys are back online yet. I'm going to go ahead and repopulate this group. And what you'll see here is that one of the clients has disappeared. Why? Because that client no longer fits the configuration of the no reg code group because it's had the security template applied to it. That unit has now appeared in the reg code filtered group instead because it now has the lockdown security template on it. Let's take a look at that unit and see what we've done. So when we come to look at this one, we see now that the only icon that we have is our control panel icon. Typically, we would have the power button as well as icons to control different configuration options in here. But because this one has a secured template applied to it, we only have the icon for the control panel. We'll put in our control panel password, which we generally would not have, but because this is a secured template, we've applied a password to it as well. And once we get into our control panel here, we can go into our security settings. We see that here we have applied our lockdown password. We've taken away the access to all of the configuration options so that the end user doesn't have the ability to make any kind of changes. And in addition to that, inside of our cloud connector, we have applied our registration code. This is the high security configuration for the manager so that you can control what units are able to connect to the Tenzing manager. This guy back up yet? He hasn't come back to us. When we take a look at this, we have the ability now to control these units in whatever manner we see fit as far as their security profiles are concerned. We can control their group management through automated application of templates, automated application of configurations, and in so doing, when we create that automatic group, we now have the ability to deploy new machines and in under 5 minutes time have those machines ready for the end user to begin working off of. And this really is our end game, is to make management simple for everybody. Now we want to talk a little bit about client-side access for a minute. There are a few different methodologies that we can use for this. We just looked at the registration code that we talked about a few minutes ago, but we also have the ability to manage these with a few different methods here. One of those is the SRV record in DNS. Using an SRV record for your internal clients, we can designate where they connect to automatically through using that SRV record. A specific named record in the DNS structure will allow you to be able to tell the endpoints when they boot up what manager that they should be connecting to. They will boot, read that SRV record, and when they do, they will go to the manager based off of the SRV record's contents. Now you do have the ability to uncheck that box for use server address from DNS SRV record, and then you can specify an address by hand as well, if that is more suitable. This is how we configure our external users' machines. We give them the ability to configure that address by hand because an external user is not always going to be able to tell you where they're connecting to, or where they're connecting from rather, but they'll always be able to know where they're connecting to. Alrighty. Now I'm going to put our first poll question up here. Curious to know how you folks are deploying your Tenzing clients. Are you using automated group filtering? Are you using drag and drop filtering? Or are you not using groups at all? Maybe you are simply using your clients all in one big lump sum and you are not including those into grouping at all. Interesting results. It looks like most of you are using the automated group filtering, and that's great because this is where the Tenzing Manager really shines. It will allow you to very easily keep your machines into their groups. It will allow you to keep them up and running and working well. Now we talked about our IP-based groups, and I want to show you something really quickly here. On our external groups, we have the ability to filter these. Like I said, these are using the exclusive filtering methodology. These will allow you to exclude any external or internal subnets so that you only will receive your external clients in them. And you can see now that as the clients refresh, the machines come on and offline. This will give you a real-time view into how each of these units is connected, where they're connecting from IP address-wise. You can see that there are several from our offsite VPN network, for instance, that are connecting back into our manager. This will give you a real-time view of all of your externally connected users, along with the ability to address those users directly. We have the opportunity here not only to remote support those users within their zero client, we also have the ability to remote support those users in their VDI connections too. So we can get all of this even for our external users. So this gives you a level of manageability and a level of support that you don't typically get in a zero client. You have the ability now to completely support that external user. And as we turn more toward a work from home environment, this becomes increasingly important. We need to be able to give our users 100% support from wherever they happen to be, whether it is at their home environment, whether they're hot desking inside of the office, or whether they're at a Starbucks in Chicago. We need to be able to give them all of our attention and all of our support, and we can now do that using the Tenzing Manager. Now coming back to our DNS slide here, I just wanted to talk about one other thing very quickly. We have the ability through our registration codes also to create a username and password link to the manager as well. So we have that as a secondary option. Most folks are going to use the registration button simply because they can do this easily and quickly, but you do have the option of username and password security as well. Now, when we look at our manager, if we look at our manager and our reg code filtered unit again, we notice that we have the registration code for this machine. And here, this particular one happens to be called test code. Now I can use this test code registration against all of my Tenzing Manager groups if I choose to, so that any machine that connects using that code will be able to connect into the manager wherever it's connecting from, whether it be internal, external, or anywhere in between. It can connect from whatever I want it to. However, if we want to affect different security roles or different security levels across different groups of clients, we also have the ability to use different registration codes on a per group basis. So we have the option of doing that as well, where we can create varying registration codes. We can assign each of those codes to an associated group. And by doing that, we then can vary how the units show up in each one of these groups. If we want to have an external code for our external users groups, we can simply create it in here. We can call it external. And now we have a code assigned to our outside units. And it's not easy to change the configurations. It's really very simple. We want to make this easy for everyone so that management is a very non-user restrictive task, I guess you would say. Now, once we've deployed the units, now we have to be able to manage those. And I want to talk a little bit about post-deployment management. We looked at automatic configurations based on group membership over here, but we also have the ability within these units to manage them individually. If I want to assign a different template or a different configuration to a machine, I can always take that machine and I can apply a template to it directly. I also have the opportunity to VNC directly into that machine individually, as I've been doing throughout the webinar, and I can see that endpoint. When we do this, we also have the opportunity to see into the user's VDI session if they happen to be in session and needing support for an application within the session there. We want to make sure that everybody understands that these are individual functions here, but you also have these at a group level for the most part. If we want to take group-based functions, we can use scheduled tasking in order to make changes to entire groups of machines at a time. Now this is for after your deployment is complete. Maybe we need to make a mass change, whether it be a mass firmware update so that we can update all of our units at the same time, or a mass template configuration change. We can do that through the scheduled tasking, simply by picking a new template to add there. We'll call this job template. If I can type. We can choose a security template. We'll choose our open security for this one. And then we can choose to allow the user to defer that action if we want to. If we want it to happen in the right now, we can set that schedule, and now we've created a scheduled task. If we want to see that task, we can go in and we can show all of the tasks for the entire environment, or we can see a task that's applied to a particular machine by itself. In this particular case, here is our newly created task. You can see that it's marked pending over here, in that it has not yet run. If we take a look at the task's configuration, we can see its name, the frequency of run, when it's supposed to run, and what it's doing here. It is applying a configuration template back to those devices. And as is typical with all things live, it failed to apply the template. This is why things happen wonderfully when live stuff goes on. Always fun. All right. So within our scheduled tasks, we also have the ability to edit or to delete the tasks if we want to. I can delete it from our list. I also have the opportunity to edit a task. Maybe it failed, so I want it to rerun again at 9 o'clock instead of at 8:30, so that I can have an opportunity to try to remediate whatever the problem was that caused the failure. I can make that change. It's marked as pending again, and it'll then run at 9 o'clock. And we can even see details on the information around the tasks. Now, as I said, you can also update firmware on a group basis from here. You can apply firmware updates to internal or to external clients. If you want to update all of your externally connected users in their homes, you can right-click here, create your new scheduled task in order to apply a firmware update to that external group. We can see from our external clients list here that it looks like now all of our external clients have gone offline for the day. It's the end of their workday, they're now done. Those clients will come back online in the morning when they boot back up. We also have the opportunity through our scheduled task list to create online and offline times for the units so that we can automatically shut down and power on those machines as well. That's for internal connected units, not for the external ones. This does use Wake on LAN, and so it requires an internal network to be able to do that. Now, I do want to leave a little bit of time for answering some questions. I know that there were a couple of questions that were posed here, and I want to take one or two of those now. Let's open up these. It says for something like the naming convention, if you already have, say, Lab 1, Lab 2, Lab 3, Lab 4 in place, and later add the auto naming convention, will it pick up at 5 or start over at 1? That's a great question, Jessica. Thank you. I see I have a couple questions up here, so that's good. Now, what will happen when you define that convention is that it's going to begin at the beginning. The configuration is going to mark those units as Lab 1, 2, 3, etc., beginning with the first one in the group. So it is going to rename the units that you've already named in that convention. However, if they already conform to the naming convention, if it happens to hit the one that's already Lab 1, when it goes to name it Lab 1, it won't rename it. It'll compare the name and then see that it's already there. But from a typical standpoint, assuming that it doesn't know which units are in order, it's going to go ahead and rename all of those. Your second question, can you nest groups? You absolutely can. And this is actually a good question. Let me walk through that with you very quickly, since we're on that one. If I want to take my IP filtered group here, I can create nested groups beneath one another. And I can take a subset of those IPs if I want to, for instance. Let's do a bigger range than that. So I can take a subset of those IPs, I can put them into that subgroup, and now we have 23 units that are in that subgroup. Now the caveat here is that all the members of a subgroup have to be members of the top level group above it in order to be able to be a subgroup member. Now, what this gives you is a little bit of increased flexibility in the fact that you can apply a configuration template to the top level group, and that configuration template will also be applied to the units in the subgroup. What you can do, though, is if, for instance, you need to affect a small change, if you use this as your total group, but these as time zones, for instance, you can apply a template at the subgroup level that will only affect the members of that subgroup. Time zones are one of the ones that we see pretty often from customers who have offices in different geographic regions. They will add in a maybe global group here, they'll add in a state group here, and then apply the time zone template for that particular group or that particular state to that group so that each of those units is in the correct time zone. And you can apply different templates to each of the subgroups in order to affect that small level of change while still configuring the overall or controlling the overall configuration at the top level. So if the top is floor and is only sorted by a naming convention, then a subgroup is the department that has further settings. That's exactly how you can use this. You also have the opportunity, if you have perhaps a location that has different security levels, you can use different security level templates for each of those as well. Next question, can units belong to two groups? Some machines are sorted by name or branch, but there are specific machines that have different resolutions set among all of the groups. I'm guessing you probably mean video resolutions, and that's absolutely correct. Machines can belong to two groups. Now, the caveat to this is that you can only have them in one group with an auto configuration template. Why? Because you would be applying two templates to the groups. How can you overcome this if you do need to apply multiple templates is that you can stack them in a single auto configuration group. If we go back to this group here where we've got our automated configuration here, we can always apply multiple templates to this group. I'll just do these as an example, not that you would do it like this because this would defeat the purpose, but you can assign multiple templates to a group so that you can assign, for instance, your primary template and then a resolution-based template as well, if you needed to. And that would give you the ability to then to affect the primary configuration as well as the special video configurations that you need for the different groupings. When you do set it into multiple groups, they definitely will appear exactly the same way, and you can get a good example of that from looking at the Thin Clients group here. This is a catch-all group. It's configured automatically when you install the manager. It has all of your machines in it by default. You can see that my Webinar 2 unit is here. It also happens to live here in the reg code filtered group. And these are both the same machine, they're the same configuration, and they're managed the same way. We would only want to apply a template to one of the groups, however. Our next question from Tim. When the manager server is installed, all ports found in FAQ 8 and 20 are added to the firewall inbound and outbound automatically. When the same network, I am permitted to wake on LAN, however, a device in the .8 network cannot. Also, port 9 is allowed in firewall rules and in the manager 168.1 network. What am I missing? Tim, I would say we should probably take that offline just so that we can go through your specific configuration a little bit more. I'm happy to reach out to you to schedule that after we get done with the webinar. Moving on, will this work on demo RPOS clients? It absolutely will. If you are demoing our repurposing software, that's what RPOS is. You can use the Tenzig Manager. Anybody who's demoing any of our clients is able to use the Tenzig Manager. You can always download it from our website. We can supply you with the URL for downloading the manager. You can install it either locally in your data center. You can install it in the cloud. The manager will run anywhere that you want to put it. And you can use that to remote manage any of your clients, whether they be demo or purchased models. All right, that looks like that was our last question. I'm going to open up one of the other poll questions here. And this poll is about our demo units. If you would like a no obligation demo, if you're not a current customer, we want to be able to get in touch with you. So if you could please go ahead and answer that question for me, I would appreciate that. All right. Now this concludes our demo for today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your attention. I hope that that we were able to answer some questions for you. If you have any other questions, you're more than welcome to email demosupport@tenzig.com. We're happy to help you out with those. You also have the opportunity, if you are a customer or if you're even a potential customer and you'd like some support, you're always welcome to email support@tenzig.com for our US customers and support@tenzig.eu for any of our European or UK customers. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. And again, thank you for your interest in 10zig.